Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today we're going to be talking about the Holosun 512C. But before we get into that, I do need to thank the sponsor of the video and the channel, and that is of course going to be Gun Deals. If you don't know, Gun Deals is a website that provides you with links to some of the best prices in the industry. And most importantly, they don't take your money, they don't buy or sell anything, they merely point you in the right direction of some of the best deals within the industry. So if saving money on cool stuff is of interest to you like it is to me, go ahead and check them out. Once again, that is gun.deals, and go ahead and tell them thanks for sponsoring the video and the channel and allowing me to shoot so much ammunition on the channel, because they have basically been bankrolling most of my ammunition budget. But with that out of the way, if you want to go ahead and like, share, and subscribe, as all that sort of stuff is free and it does help me out quite a bit. Also, go ahead and comment literally anything down below. On top of that, there's Subscribestar, which is basically a pro to a Patreon. You send me a couple bucks a month and I send you some additional content and get you entered in some very cool giveaways. Now, last thing before we get going, you might also notice that we have a very special upper receiver here. This is a 14.5-inch pin and weld upper receiver put together by yours truly. This is actually going to be part of my Mark III upper receiver line. So we have a Ballistic Advantage 14.5-inch barrel, pinned and welded Strike Industries Venom flash hider. This is their 4-prong flash hider, and it comes in, of course, the Chad quad rail version, and of course the sleek and efficient M-LOK as well. There will be two versions of it, as well as we have a restock on the Mark I upper receivers. Now, the Mark I upper receivers, there is a slight parts change. We went with a much higher quality, much softer shooting Ballistic Advantage barrel versus the BCA barrel, and the price has remained the same at $360 shipped for a complete upper receiver, and the price on the 14.5 pin and welds is also $400. So if that's of interest to you, they should be live by the time this video goes up. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about some of the basic features of the Holosun 512C. Now, the first thing you will probably notice, as it is kind of its defining feature, is it is kind of a chonky boy, very similar to the EOTech XPS2 and 3 series, as well as the Vortex, the AMG, the Hueys, and as well, I believe, the SIG Romeo or the SIG 8Ts, all have a very similar size, weight, shape, that sort of thing, and it does come with a unique set of pros and cons. So the weight of this optic is actually only 8 ounces, which is kind of on the lighter side. I believe EOTech 512s are around 11 ounces, and some of the other optics are going to be anywhere from like 7 to 10 ounces. So in terms of its competition, it's a very, very comparable weight, and it's not too bad in terms of size. One of the best features about these sort of large windowed red dots is, of course, that large window. So you have a window size on the Holosun 512C of 1 inch tall by 1 1/4 inch wide, which is a huge field of view. Now, I know that that's more of a preference thing, because when you're shooting with a red dot, you should be shooting with both eyes open, so your field of view is actually much closer to 180 degrees than it is to whatever you actually see through the window. However, a lot of people have a preference for a larger window, and they feel that it makes them a little bit faster in actual target acquisition and seeing stuff through the glass. So if that's your jam, this optic will absolutely do that for you, as it does have a massive window. Now, because the 512 is followed by the C, that means we do, of course, have the solar failsafe on top. Personally, I've never used it, and unless you're in some sort of really, really long-term use case with the 512C or any of the Holosun optics, it's probably never going to come into play. Some people like the feature. For me, it's more of a gimmick, and I would rather not see it there and save a little bit of expense and weight and that sort of thing, but it is there if people like the feature. Now, on the left side of the optic, we have our plus and minus buttons for both controlling the brightness of the reticle, but also switching the reticle. So this one here comes with 2 reticles. It has the 2 MOA dot plus 65 MOA, kind of EOTech donut of death. And then if you hold down the minus button, it will cycle through to the smaller, just 2 MOA dot. If that's your jam, if you like more of a precise, clean dot, you can cycle through that, or you can have the 65 MOA outer circle as well. With the 65 MOA outer circle, you are going to cut down your battery life, because it does, of course, have to illuminate more. So I think your battery life goes from 50,000-ish hours with auto on, auto off, down to about 10 or 20,000 hours. Now, as I've said in other videos, because this is paired with auto on, auto off, the battery life is essentially infinite, or whatever you can, whatever sort of battery life you expect from your actual battery itself. This does use a 2032 battery with a very nifty QD insert to take it out in and out really quickly if you did need to swap batteries. However, again, I would expect the batteries in these to last anywhere from 5 to 15 years because again, the reticle is only on when the gun is actually moving. So if you leave this in a controlled environment like a safe for like 5 or 10 years, you pick it up, as long as that battery can still hold charge, the odds are that the optic is still going to turn on and work just fine for you. So battery life on these style of optics with extremely long battery lives on top of auto on, auto off, the battery life is going to be exceptional. Now overall, the exterior of the optic is very clean. There's not a lot of stuff on the outside of it. However, what that means is that we have recessed windage and elevation. Now the problem with that is that these are probably the worst windage and elevation dials that I've ever seen on a large size optic. They are basically glorified pistol windage and elevation knobs. They feel extremely mushy. It is very, very difficult to tell what is a click and what is not a click. Now they are half MOA, and once you get it zeroed, you shouldn't have to worry about it. You're never going to be dialing or anything like that. Just let it be known that the windage and elevation dials on the 512C are the cheapest feeling ones that I've ever used and somewhat subpar for the segment that they're in. Not that it's a big deal, but I do just want that to be known. Now, if I haven't mentioned already, the material that they went with is a hard coat anodized 6061, or what they call aircraft grade aluminum, which is very good. We did do a drop test on this, and it does have a very thick hole over the glass, so the glass is very well protected, and I don't believe that there would be any impact that this would not survive that you would survive. So this is a very, very tanky design, and the optic body itself is going to be very, very strong. On top of that, the exterior overall is quite nice. The only thing that I dislike about it is going to be the windage and elevation. The illumination dials are very tactile, very clicky. You can hear them, you can feel them, all good there. On top of that, you do have 10 daylight settings and 2 night vision settings, though I don't believe that this optic is going to be good for night vision, and we'll get into that in a minute. Now, all of that is held to your actual rifle, to your upper receiver, via a fairly nice size crossbolt, as well as 2 integrated recoil lugs on the mount itself of the Holosun 512C. Now, the problem with this mount is that, one, it's not switchable and it's not adjustable in any way. So this comes, I believe, lower 1/3 or absolute. So it's either 153 or 163. So if you're looking for a taller mount for the 512C, what you're going to have to do is add a 1/2 inch riser to it, and that's going to put you up to that, 1.9, 2 inch height, which is a very, very comfortable height, and something that I would recommend if you want to get this up a little higher. You're going to have to invest in a Picatinny riser, about a 1/2 inch or so. Now, the problem that I have with this crossbolt, and this is kind of going to be the Achilles heel of this optic, is that the crossbolt itself, while it is quite large and quite strong, it uses a very, very tiny hex head, which limits the amount of torque you're able to put down onto the bolt itself to about 35 inch-pounds. At 35 inch-pounds, I was almost stripping it out, so I've been very, very careful with it since then. However, if you take this crossbolt, you throw it away, and you get another crossbolt with a much better hex head or something else like that, that would allow you to get up to 45, 50 inch-pounds of torque. You're going to get a much, much more secure mounting solution. And because, of course, you have those 2 integrated recoil lugs, I would be very, very confident in its ability to hold zero. Now, moving on from there, one of the main reasons you're going to buy an optic like this is going to be for that big glass and the reticle. So you do get of course, the 65 MOA circle, if I go ahead and turn it back on, and the 2 MOA dot. Now, the 2 MOA dot is very, very good. It's very, very crisp. It's very clean. Under magnification, it looks very, very good. So whatever emitter that they're using in this optic is very, very high quality. You don't get a mushy, washed out dot or anything else like that. On top of that, on max brightness, it is insanely bright. So you get a very, very bright, very, very crisp dot. However, to achieve that crisp dot, they put in a very aggressive blue-green notch filter, and it is very, very aggressive. In broad daylight, it is the most noticeable, and it will actually kind of wash out green backgrounds. Green backgrounds will kind of start to mesh together and make it a little bit difficult to actually see what you're looking at. Now, I live in the Pacific Northwest, where it is very, very green all of the time, basically, so Sometimes at longer range, 70, 100, 200 yards, looking through this glass, it was very difficult to tell where I had a camouflage painted steel. So that is a pretty big downside for me, that the notch filter is so aggressive. Now, the reason that they went with an aggressive notch filter is, one, to save battery life. You know, you have the 65 MOA circle, which is going to eat up more battery life. So if you add in a more aggressive notch filter to increase the contrast and therefore the visible brightness of the dot itself, you don't have to run as much power through it. So I understand why they went with a very aggressive notch filter. However, in broad daylight, it is the most noticeable. In other situations, like right now when I'm inside or when I'm at night using white light, it is perfectly acceptable. However, I do just want it to be known that while the glass itself is good and it's very crisp and clear, there's no like fuzziness or anything else like that in the glass, even under magnification, the notch filter is very aggressive, which does make it more difficult to distinguish targets with a green environment. Now, something that I do want to say about this, and that is basically true about all optics that I test, is that my eyes are different than your eyes, and so the way that my eyes see things, you know, depending on if you have astigmatism or anything else like that, or you have better or worse vision, your experience with the optic could be slightly different. However, it does have a very aggressive notch filter, so whoever you are, you should still be able to notice that aggressive notch filter. However, it could be more or less obnoxious for you personally, so just keep that in mind. Now, I was still able to use it under magnification just fine for longer shots, 200-300 yards, no problems. The magnifier that we were using was the HM3X, also by Holosun. Probably the best budget magnifier for $200 or less. Very good field of view, very clean, very crisp glass with a decent eye relief, not great, but a decent eye relief. And the glass on the 512C did not hold me back too much. Again, the only time that it's really going to be an issue is if you have a very green background and that notch filter starts to blend stuff together and you're shooting low visibility targets. So depending on your use case for this, could be an issue, could not be an issue. Now, in terms of testing on the optic, I have had this optic on quite a few different guns. I've had it on the Geisley behind me, as well as the Faxon 11.5, as well as a Roscoe 16-inch race gun, as well as this Mark III 14.5-inch pin and weld. Now, the total round count is somewhere at around 1,500-ish rounds, which is a fairly decent round count for me, especially in that time, because, you know, that's about $500 worth of ammunition or more ammunition with this optic. And throughout all that time, I have not had any shift in zero. It has been very fast. Again, you do have a very crisp dot, and I really like the 65 MOA circle. For me, it helps bracket targets, and you can use it as a ranging feature on man-sized targets. However, me personally, I just like it. For me, it appears to draw my eye to the center a little bit faster. Maybe it doesn't, but again, that's just my perception of it. So overall, I really like the optic, and it has performed very well for me. However, we did do a double drop test on the optic, and this is going to tie back into that cross bolt having a subpar tensioning method. Now, the double drop test is done from shoulder height. So we do a 5-round control group at 50 yards. And we do a drop on the top of the optic and then a drop on the side of the optic. And at 50 yards, I had about 1 inch to 1.5 inch shift up and to the right. Now what that means is that's about 3 MOA. Now 3 MOA is not going to make much of a difference on man-sized targets inside 2 or even 300 yards, depending where you're shooting. However, at extended distances, that is definitely going to push you off target. And if you're shooting at smaller targets up close, that can still be a pretty big issue. Now, the problem with that is that I haven't mentioned it yet, but this is a $300+ optic that I did pay my own money for this optic. Now, the way that I actually came about this optic was I had a 503 CU that I put on a 12 gauge, the 12 gauge behind me. That killed the optic, so then I sent it back into Holosun. Holosun offered to upgrade me to the 512C for only an extra $100, so I paid $100 to get the 512C, which is quite nice, and their warranty was very fast in getting it back out to me. But if you yourself go out and spend $300 or more on this optic, say $350 or $400, because I believe the MSRP is like $450 or something like that. So if you spend quite a bit of money on this, you're getting right in the same territory as EOTechs, as low-end aim points, and a plethora of other budget red dots that have held zero for me, no issue. So depending on who you are, depending on your use case, that can be a very large con. Now, it should also be noted that every drop test that I do is anecdotal to me on my gun on that day with that ammunition. So if you go out and do the exact same double drop test wherever you're at, you might get no shift in zero. However, I did experience a shift in zero on the optic, so that is why I'm mentioning it. And if you were attempting to get, say, an EOTech, but with much better battery life and a little bit smaller, you're probably not getting the same level of ultimate durability and ultimate ability to hold zero that you would be on, say, an aim point with a really good mount or an EOTech or something like that. So that is going to hold back the optic for me in terms of like really serious use cases or really serious applications, like if you're a police officer or something and you want something that has a much better battery life than an EOTech on your carbine, then the 512C might look like a very tempting option, especially on paper, for the same or even a little bit less money than some of the other quote-unquote professional optics on the market. But for me, because it has that very weak tensioning method on the crossbolt itself is quite nice, but because I was only able to get 35 inch-pounds of torque on it, when I'd like to see 45 or 50 like I can get on most of my other mounts, even like a Sig Romeo 5 with a Geisley mount, which is like a total cost of like 175 bucks. That one there where you can get 65 inch-pounds of torque on the mount itself. And on top, I have double dropped that setup in a bunch of different mounts, and with a good mount, that will experience no shift in zero. And again, the mount in here is not switchable, so you're stuck with what you get. That for me is going to be a pretty major downside. So overall, while I really like the optic, for me, I probably wouldn't use it for a super serious application, just because if it experiences a sharp impact, not necessarily a drop, but it could be a drop, it could be a car door, something else like that. If it experiences a very sharp impact, it has a higher possibility than some of the other optics of shifting zero, which could be a very big deal. Now, for other use case scenarios, it is pretty awesome. So for competition shooting, it's going to be very nice. If you like shooting big red dots with big windows, this is going to be a very good choice. That again gives you kind of EOTech vibes with a little bit lower glass quality and of course much less cost as well, or a little bit less cost in certain circumstances. Now on top of that, it's a very fun red dot to use because that big window is quite nice. A lot of people are going to really like that with the 65 MOA circle, 2 MOA dot. It's very fun, it's very fast. So for target shooting, for competition shooting, for even home defense where you're probably a little bit less likely to experience a very harsh impact, at least theoretically correct, you can always manufacture a situation in which you will. I think that the Holosun 512C is a very good choice for some of those applications. Now, it's probably not ever going to be the highest value or the most efficient use. I think the Sig Romeo 7 is actually going to be a better choice. That's a very similar optic, well, different style of optic, right? It's kind of a comp M4 or a cope M4, I should say. But the mounting solution on it did hold zero on me. In my drop test, it has a 30mm window, so it's not a square or a rectangle like this guy is, but it still has the larger objective that people like for, again, about $200, $230 versus $300, $350. So I think there are more dollar for dollar efficient options than the 512C. However, if you're somebody who really likes the solar failsafe, the boxy window, just the Holosun customer service and warranty, because I believe this does come with their lifetime warranty, or at least like a 5 or 10 year warranty, which is quite good. It has a QD battery tray with 2032s, which most of the other small micro red dots use. So there are features and things to like about the optic. However, I think that unless you're really into the feature set of this specific optic, I would probably recommend other a little bit more high value options. And if you're looking for true ultimate durability, ultimate kind of duty grade performance, then you're still probably going to be looking at some of the low end EOTechs, which I should mention that I've owned a couple EOTech 512s. They both performed excellently for me, and I paid $300 for both of them because I bought them used, and that is cheaper than the Holosun 512C. Now the Holosun 512C has a very good battery life, and that's about the only pro to the Holosun 512C, is it has better battery life. The EOTechs have far better glass, will be able to be used under night vision because of the very aggressive notch filter on the 512C. I don't believe that this would be a good candidate for night vision. I don't have night vision, so I can't test that. But from what I've heard, the very, very aggressive notch filters on the lower end red dots like the Sig Romeos and the Holosuns are going to kind of decrease its performance at night, because of course those notch filters, while they might make the dot look a little bit more contrasty, they are of course going to cut the overall light transmission, which on our night vision at night when there is no light, that is a very, very important thing to have. So overall, I really like the 512C, and if it had held 0 perfectly on me, I would really, really like it. However, I do think that there are higher value options on the market. However, again, this is still a good optic, a very, very good optic, especially for the money, but it's not going to be at the peak of price to performance. So if it has a feature set that you like and you want to pick it up for your specific application that it works well for, I would say absolutely go ahead. But if you're looking for the pinnacle of price to performance, this probably is not going to be it. So that's about it for the video, guys. I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think of the 512C or other larger style boxy optics that I should check out. And that's about it. Go ahead and check out the Mark III, which should be live on the website when this video goes live, and I will see you guys next one. Peace off.